Welcome back to the deep dive. We are diving deep today into, I think, the single most important infrastructure shift happening on the EVM right now, account abstraction.
Absolutely.
And this is far beyond just a simple discussion of better user interfaces.
Oh, way beyond.
We are going to dissect the architecture of ERC 4337, really understand the security implications, and map out the strategic risks. This is for technical leaders, if you're a DeFi project director or a security architect wrestling with this stuff.
That's the mission, exactly. We have to move entirely past the marketing gloss of no more seed phrases and actually analyze the mechanics.
Right.
We need to understand how the bundlers, the paymasters, and the entry point contract all talk to each other, where the new attack surfaces are, and what developers absolutely must audit before they even think about deploying.
Because if you're building high-value systems, you need to know the attack vectors, not just the benefits.
Precisely.
So let's start, as always, with the core problem. What made this whole overhaul necessary in the first place? It's this rigid split in account types, right?
Yeah, that dichotomy has defined the EVM ecosystem for years. Historically, Ethereum gave us two account types, and they force a really unacceptable trade-off.
Okay, so on one side, you have the ones we all know.
The externally owned accounts, or EOAs, your typical wallet, it's defined by a single private key, and it's active. It can initiate transactions, it can pay gas.
But it's so inflexible.
Cripplingly inflexible. And that inflexibility is a direct, massive barrier to mass adoption. All it can really do is basic transfers. It can't run any custom logic.
And for a security layer, the failure modes are just catastrophic.
They are, because the security model is a single point of failure. That one private key.
Lose it and your funds are gone.
Forever. And if it's compromised, the attacker has total irreversible control. The source material really emphasizes this. It's like a 1990s security model in a 2020s environment. It can't support MFA. It can't support key rotation.
Plus, there's that operational friction you mentioned, the fact you always have to have Ether, the native gas token, just to do anything.
The bootstrap problem. It's a headache for every single new user. Now, you compare that to the other side. The contract accounts, or SCAs.
Okay.
These are amazing. They're programmable, governed by code. They can enforce complex logic, multi-sig rules, spending limits, time locks. It's the ideal security model. But they're inherently passive.
They're these incredible vaults, but they can't open themselves.
That is a perfect analogy. An SCA cannot start a transaction on its own. It needs an E-way to poke it, to trigger it. So ERC 4337 is this ambitious attempt to finally get rid of that dichotomy.
To get the best of both worlds.
Exactly. To get the programmability and security of a contract account, but with the power to initiate actions that, historically only belong to an EOA. The goal is to make every user account a programmable, self-custodial smart contract.
Okay, so let's unpack the solution then. This dream of account abstraction, it's been around forever. Proposals like EIP 86 kept stalling because they needed these huge, politically messy changes to the core protocol.
Right, they required consensus layer changes.
So what changed with ERC 4337 in March 2023? How did they achieve AA without a hard fork? And what are these new components we have to understand?
The big breakthrough was realizing they could do it all at the application layer.
So they sidestepped the core protocol debate.
Completely. Instead of changing the EVM's rules, they built a parallel infrastructure on top of it, using existing smart contracts and off-chain relayers to basically mimic a native transaction system. That's why it succeeded where the others failed.
So we're not actually seeing a new native transaction type. We're seeing a new kind of transaction object that's handled by a whole new system.
Precisely. And this new system really introduces two main concepts. First, you have the smart contract accounts, or smart wallets. These are what the user interacts with, totally programmable.
And second?
The user operations, or user ops. This is the key structural innovation. A user op is a pseudo-transaction object. It's a data packet that defines everything the user wants to do.
Okay, so not just a simple transfer. It could be deploying a contract or a token swap or something really complex.
All of that, plus specific instructions on how to verify it and how to pay for it.
All right, for our technical listeners, we need to get into the weeds on the user operations structure itself. This is the new primitive everyone's building around. Can you walk us through the fields? The structure really defines the security model here.
It does. So the user op is a struct. It starts with the basic sender, which is just the address of the smart wallet that's initiating everything. Then, crucially, you have the nonce.
Which is for replay protection, like a normal transaction.
It is, but it also serves a dual purpose.
Yeah.
During account deployment, That nonce is often used as a unique salt for the create2 opcode.
Which gives you a deterministic address.
Exactly. That create2 mechanism is essential for onboarding new users. If an account hasn't been deployed yet, the transaction needs to include those instructions.
And that's where the init code field comes in.
Right. If the sender address doesn't have any code on chain yet, the bundler will use this init code to deploy it via a known factory contract. The power of create2 is that you can calculate the wallet's address before it exists on chain.
So a user can receive funds to an account that hasn't even been deployed yet.
It's a huge deal for user experience.
Okay, so once the account is deployed, the action itself is in the call data.
Correct. That's the payload, the ABI encoded function call. Then you get this complex set of gas parameters, which are vital for the economic security of the whole system.
You have call gas limit for the execution, verification gas limit for the validation, and then pre-verification gas. What's that for?
So pre-verification gas is what compensates the bundler for all their overhead. Running the simulation, handling the network traffic, the potential cost if something fails before the main validation even starts.
So it's an anti-griefing mechanism and makes sure the bundler gets paid for their work even if the user app ultimately fails.
Exactly. And finally, you have the two fields that really enable the abstraction part.
Gas payment and custom security.
Right. You've got paymaster and data, which holds the address of the paymaster if you're using one, and the signature. And this is the heart of AA. That signature can be anything. It could be standard ECDSA, a multi-sig hash, a proof from a passkey.
Total flexibility. So the user signs the user up, and it doesn't go to the regular Ethereum mempool. It goes somewhere else.
It goes to the dedicated user operation mempool. It's this alternate waiting area. And monitoring this mempool are the bundlers.
And what is a bundler, really?
A bundler is essentially any EVM node that's running some specialized software. They watch the user op mempool, they grab a bunch of user ops, and they aggregate them into a single standard EVM transaction.
The bundle.
The bundle. And the bundler takes on that EOA role we talked about.
Yeah.
They pay the native gas fee up front, they sign that final transaction, and they submit it to the main Ethereum mempool.
Okay, but that sounds like a potential centralization risk. I mean, if a few bundlers control the whole flow, couldn't they just censor people?
Yeah. That is a critical concern, and we have to get into that in the security section. The protocol tries to mitigate it with things like economic staking. But you're right, bundlers have a very powerful role.
And I assume they're economically incentivized to pick the most profitable bundles, which opens up a whole new can of MEV worms.
A whole new vector we need to look at, yes.
So the bundler builds this bundle. Where does it send it?
It's submitted to the entry point contract. This is a single, dedicated, globally recognized, and most importantly, a highly audited smart contract on Ethereum. It's the central clearinghouse for everything.
The bundler just calls one function, handle ops, and passes in all the user ops.
That's it.
So walk us through what happens inside that entry point contract. This is where the magic happens, right? Where the smart account logic replaces the normal EOA validation.
It is. The entry point runs a very strict two-phase process for every user op in that bundle. First is the verification phase. The entry point calls the smart wallet's validate user op function. This is where the custom signature gets checked. The entry point also checks the nonce and makes sure the fees are covered.
And if a paymaster is involved?
Its validation function, validate paymaster user op, gets called right here to verify the sponsorship and pre-fund the bundler.
Okay, so only if all of that passes.
Only then does it move to the execution phase. The entry point calls the smart wallet's execute function, passing in the call data. And then the smart wallet does its thing, a swap, a transfer, whatever it was meant to do.
So the entry point acts as this crucial firewall. It makes sure no gas is wasted on invalid operations and that the bundler is guaranteed to get paid before the real work even starts.
Precisely. That economic guarantee for the bundler is vital because they're the ones paying those hefty native gas fees up front.
Let's just focus on the paymasters for a second. You mentioned almost all current adoption relies on them. For a DeFi project, this is the key to getting real users right. It removes that ETH barrier.
It completely solves the ETH bootstrap problem. Paymasters are optional smart contracts that, well, they pre-fund the transaction. They enable two main things. Either full gas sponsorship, where the DApp just pays the fee for you, or ERC20 gas payment,
Mm.
where you, the user, can pay in something like USDC, and the paymaster handles all the messy swaps and ETH payments behind the scenes.
And they get called during that validation phase. But this introduces a whole new layer of trust and complexity, doesn't it?
It introduces significant supply chain risk. I mean, the entry point contract is canonical, it's battle-tested, but paymasters are application-specific. They can be incredibly complex.
They need logic to decide if they should sponsor a transaction.
Right. Is this a loyal user? Do they have the right token balance? Is this part of a promotion? And if that internal logic is flawed, you open the door to DOS attacks or economic griefing, which is a huge focus for our security analysis later on.
Okay, so we've laid out the technical architecture. Now let's talk about the payoff. The massive UX gains, and maybe more importantly, the security gains. We're moving from this static security model built on fear of losing one key, to something more dynamic.
It's a total transformation. The wallet stops being a simple container and becomes an active security agent. The user is now defining the rules of engagement for their own assets.
Let's detail those wins for a security leader. The first big one is recovery. It eliminates that single point of failure.
Social recovery is the classic example. Instead of a seed phrase, your smart account can be set up to require confirmation from a set of guardians,
So trusted friends or other devices you own.
or even an institutional custodian. You can set up a 3 of 5 scheme where you need 3 of your 5 guardians to approve a key rotation. This means you can get back into your account even if you lose your primary phone or device.
This also unlocks modern security primitives that aren't ECDSA.
Absolutely. We get this new flexibility through custom validation. We're not stuck with ECDSA anymore. The account can support biometrics through passkeys, more efficient signature schemes like Schnorr or BLS.
Or even quantum-resistant algorithms.
You could build in support for Lamport or Winternit signatures. It allows developers to future-proof their accounts without forcing a user to migrate all their assets every time cryptography advances.
And the sources also point to real-time security gains through programmatic rules.
That's the introduction of programmable restrictions. This is a huge paradigm shift. The smart account can enforce things like daily spending limits
Or whitelisting certain dApps.
or time locks on large transfers. Think about a compromised key. With an EOA, the attacker takes everything in one go. With a smart account, they hit a daily spending limit.
Which gives you time to react.
It gives you or your recovery guardians time to intervene. It turns a total fund loss into a partial, maybe even reversible loss.
And critically, the account itself can evolve.
That's upgradability. You can change your signing key, update your guardian list, add new features like a session key module, all without ever having to move a single asset.
That's huge for institutions where key rotation is a constant requirement.
It's essential. It removes the cost, the complexity, and the risk of migrating funds.
Okay, let's pivot to the operational benefits. For DeFi and gaming, transaction batching is a massive win.
Batching is crucial. It's better UX and it's more gas efficient. It lets you combine multiple steps like approve an ERC20, swap it on a DX, and then deposit it into a lending pool all into one atomic user op.
Signed once.
Signed once. It reduces on-chain transactions, lowers the total gas cost, and it guarantees atomicity. Either all 3 steps succeed or none of them do.
Right, no more getting stuck with a useless approval transaction because the swap failed.
Exactly. And that friction of signing every single little action, especially in something like a Web3 game, is solved by session keys.
Session keys are a game changer for usability.
They're fantastic.
Yeah.
A user can sign a key that grants really restricted temporary permission to a specific DApp.
So, this key is valid for 24 hours, it can only call the game contract, and it can only spend up to $100 of in-game currency.
Precisely. It allows for seamless interaction without compromising the security of your main key.
And then there's financial automation. The smart account becomes this self-custodial financial agent.
That's automated transactions. The wallet itself can house logic for standing orders, recurring payments, complex conditional actions.
Like automating DeFi risk management.
Think about it. You could program your wallet to automatically add collateral to your AEV position if the health factor drops below a certain threshold. That level of self-governance was just impossible with an EOA.
And we're seeing this in the wild already.
Yeah.
What are some of the real-world examples?
In DeFi, you're seeing super apps like InstantApp and Infinex. They're using all of this batching, gas abstraction, automation to create a user experience that really starts to rival a centralized exchange.
But with self-custody.
That's the critical difference. For institutions, the implications are more about compliance and governance.
Right.
Enterprise solutions can now have hierarchical access controls, requiring multiple signatories based on transaction size. Even more powerful, they can implement compliance automation, programming the wallet to automatically reject a transaction if it's going to a blacklisted address.
And looking ahead, this is the foundation for things like AI agents.
Exactly. An ERC 7579 compliant smart account can give scoped permissions to an AI agent, allowing it to manage a liquidity position, but only within very clear spending limits and whitelisted contracts.
Okay, this is where the conversation has to shift. This is the critical risk analysis. Account abstraction solves that big existential EOA problem, the single key failure. But it introduces an entirely new and frankly complex set of smart contract vulnerabilities.
It does. For a security architect, the attack surface hasn't gone away. It's just changed shape.
The security burden shifts completely onto the integrity of the contract logic.
Exactly. You're not defending a single 256-bit key anymore. You're defending potentially thousands of lines of solidity, often with complex third-party dependencies.
So let's break down the core risks. The first is just generalized smart contract risk, but now it's your actual account.
That is the primary risk. Smart contract account vulnerability. Every custom feature you add, social recovery, MFA logic, spending limits, is a potential logic flaw.
For example,
If you write faulty logic for key rotation, an attacker might find a re-entrancy vector in the validation function itself. A flaw in the account logic could let them bypass all your security rules and drain the account.
which is why using battle-tested, standardized implementations is so important.
That's why it's strongly advised over writing bespoke code, yes.
And the very thing that gives AA its flexibility, the custom verification logic, that's also a prime attack vector.
It is. That's the custom verification risk. The validate user out function is the gatekeeper. If your custom signature scheme is non-standard, any flaw in the cryptographic implementation could be exploited. This needs specialized crypto auditing, not just standard solidity review.
There's also risk in the shared infrastructure, especially the deployment mechanisms.
The third-party dependency risk is high. Most accounts get deployed via shared factory contracts using Create2. If a vulnerability was found in a widely used factory, it could jeopardize every single account ever deployed through it. Vetting those pieces of infrastructure is non-negotiable.
And then there's the headache of dealing with legacy contracts. This comes down to a fundamental change in who is calling the function, right?
We have to highlight the legacy code and validation around tx.origin. For years, legacy contracts used tx.origin to check if a transaction was initiated by a specific EOA.
But with AA, the transaction is always initiated by the bundler's EOA.
Always. The bundler calls the entry point calls the smart account, and the smart account calls the target DApp. Throughout that whole chain, tx.origin is still the bundler's address.
So any DApp using require tx.origin equals sender for access control just breaks.
It breaks, or worse, it creates a silent vulnerability. The DApp might fail to authenticate the user's smart account, leading to authorization failures or critically mismanaging permissions. Developers have to switch all that logic to use msg.sender.
Let's talk about the economic risks, the griefing and DOS attacks that exploit that bundler-paymaster relationship.
The whole ecosystem is a game theory problem built on financial incentives, and a key risk is paymaster manipulation and DOS.
How does that work?
A malicious user can craft a user op that's designed to use a ton of gas during validation, but then revert during execution.
Okay.
The bundler simulates it off-chain, it looks fine, so they submit it. But then it reverts on-chain. The bundler wasted gas and has to be compensated by the paymaster.
So the attacker can spam the network with these operations.
And drain the paymaster's stake deposit through wasted pre-verification gas fees. It's a denial of service attack that can make the paymaster unprofitable to run.
And what about the bundler's unique position? Does that create new MEV opportunities?
Oh yes, that's bundler extracted value and front-running griefing. The bundler sees everything before it's finalized. They can front-run a profitable arbitrage swap in a user op.
Or they can grief the user.
Exactly. They can see a user's complex user op, submit a tiny transaction just before the bundle to change the contract, state-like draining a tiny bit of liquidity, and cause the user's operation to fail and revert. The user loses gas, and the attacker profits from the state change.
So given all these risks, what's the developer checklist for mitigation? The protocol itself must have some built-in defenses.
The foundation is economic staking. Both bundlers and paymasters have to stake a significant amount of ETH in the entry point contract.
It's collateral.
It's collateral. And if the entry point determines they misbehaved, like submitting invalid user ops or wasting gas, that stake gets slashed. It's a severe financial penalty. That game theory is the primary defense.
And to prevent those gas-wasting failures, the validation process has to be predictable.
It requires deterministic validation. The validate user op and validate paymaster user op functions must be entirely deterministic. The entry point literally prevents them from using non-deterministic opcodes like block hash or timestamp.
Why is that so critical for the bundler?
Because the bundler has to simulate the validation off-chain to know it will succeed and to calculate the gas. If the validation depends on something volatile, like the current timestamp, the simulation result might not match the on-chain result.
Which leads to reverts and financial loss for the bundler.
Exactly. And the protocol also puts strict limits on what the validation logic can even do. For instance, it's generally forbidden from writing to storage owned by any contract other than the sender to prevent state manipulation during that fee check.
And what about protections for the paymaster to make sure they aren't wrongly charged?
These are the post-op protections. Paymasters have to implement a post-op function, which runs after execution. This is for cleanup and for getting reimbursed by the user. The key is the post-op function must be designed to revert if reimbursement fails. Otherwise, they risk paying for an operation they never got paid for.
Okay, so with this whole complex workflow, what should security monitoring be focused on?
Active monitoring is paramount. Teams need to watch for unusual gas parameters. They can indicate malicious simulation attempts. They need to watch for consistent validation failures from a specific paymaster, which could signal a DOS attack. And you have to investigate any bundle that reverts on-chain because that means a simulation failed or you were front-run. And finally, track participants with unusually low stakes because they're a higher financial risk.
The big takeaway here seems to be that development teams should stick to standards wherever they can.
100%. The best mitigation strategy is vetting and standardization. Don't write bespoke smart account logic from scratch unless you have massive auditing resources. Rely on pre-audited, battle-tested implementations. The complexity here means custom logic can introduce fatal attack vectors way too easily.
So let's talk about where we are today and what the future looks like. This isn't just an experiment anymore. AA is seeing real, measurable growth in 2024.
The metrics are really clear. Adoption is accelerating. Safe alone has deployed over 28 million accounts. More specific to ERC 4337, we're seeing over 19 million native smart accounts deployed and over 100 million user ops completed this year.
This is active live infrastructure.
It is.
And where is this activity happening? And what does that tell us about the killer features?
Heavily concentrated on layer 2s, especially Polygon, which has something like 92% of the market share for monthly active accounts.
Wow.
And that's largely driven by big consumer app launches like Grindery and FanTV. But the most telling stat is the paymaster dominance. The fact that 97% of all user ops use a paymaster confirms that gas abstraction is the single biggest driver of user onboarding right now.
But wait, if 97% of user ops depend on paymasters, doesn't that create a massive centralization point for the entire ecosystem?
That is a critical pushback and a significant risk. You're absolutely right. If the top 3 or 4 paymaster providers were to fail or censor transactions, almost the entire ecosystem's functionality is compromised.
So the decentralization of paymasters is the next big challenge.
It is the most important infrastructural challenge for AA adoption moving forward, yes.
Looking ahead, the next big evolution seems to be modularity. Let's talk about ERC 7579. How does that change smart account design?
ERC 7579, which launched late last year, is the key standard for modular smart accounts. It's really how AA is going to be done from now on, instead of one big monolithic contract with all the logic baked in.
You can plug in modules.
Yeah, exactly. 7579 defines these minimal interfaces that let external modules be plugged in and out.
So if I want to use a passkey for signing and a social recovery scheme for recovery, those are 2 separate independent smart contracts that just follow the 7579 standard?
It allows for incredible extensibility. The smart wallet is just a core registry, and these modules, the passkey validator, the spending limit hook, can be independently deployed, audited, and attached or detached without changing the core account.
And this modularity is what's driving innovation in chain abstraction.
It is.
We've mentioned that term, but let's define it. How do these modular wallets help manage assets across all these fragmented L2s?
Chain abstraction is all about making the user experience seamless across different chains. It shields you from bridges, different gas tokens, fragmented liquidity. It relies heavily on intent-based systems.
So instead of a transaction, I submit an intent.
Right. You say, I want $1,000 of ETH to be deposited into Adoive on Optimism. And the modular smart account, using specialized execution modules, coordinates all the necessary cross-chain swaps and bridging automatically. The modularity of 7579 is essential because it standardizes how those cross-chain modules talk to the wallet.
Okay, now let's look at the protocol level. EIP 7702 is slated for the Pectra upgrade in 2025. This seems like a huge deal for existing users. How does it work?
EIP 7702 is the critical change trying to bridge the gap between legacy EOAs and smart accounts without forcing asset migration. It's about simplified account transitioning.
So how?
The core mechanism lets an existing EOA temporarily delegate its power to a smart contract for a single transaction.
So my old EOA key can sign a transaction that says, for this one transaction, just pretend to be this smart contract.
That's it. It introduces a new transaction type that points to the delegated smart contract. When that transaction is mined, your EOA executes the code at that address. It can do batching, it can use paymasters. Then when the transaction is over, it reverts back to being a normal, rigid EOA.
That's amazing for backwards compatibility, but what's the security trade-off? There has to be one.
The trade-off is fundamental. The EOA private key remains the master key. Even though your EOA can act smart temporarily, the original private key can still execute a standard EOA transaction. It can bypass all the security rules, all the spending limits, all the recovery features of the delegated contract.
So if the key gets compromised, the attacker can still drain everything. It doesn't fix the core single key failure problem.
It doesn't. It's a fantastic UX fix, but it's not a full security upgrade for the EOA itself.
What other forward-looking standards should we be watching?
EIP 7212 is crucial. It proposes adding native EVM support for the SEC-D56R1 curve,
Which is the curve used by?
WeBauthn, passkeys, and the secure enclaves in our phones and laptops. If that's adopted, users could sign user ups using the same tools they use for Web2 logins, leveraging robust device-native hardware security.
And finally, what about the future of the infrastructure? Will this complex, decentralized ERC 4337 model face competition?
The source material suggests it might. Because the 4337 infrastructure is so complex, with the staking, the deterministic validation, the open MEV risks, it might be too heavy for some specialized apps. We might see competition from simpler, lower latency systems in verticals like intent-based systems or account automation.
So private bundlers or systems that just bypass the 43337 mempool entirely.
Exactly. Trading some liveness and censorship resistance for speed and predictability, especially where a centralized provider is already trusted.
So we have journeyed from the fundamental shortcomings of the EOA and SCA split, all the way through the sophisticated architecture of ERC 4337, understanding the roles of bundlers, paymasters, the entry point, and we've looked at the future with modularity and EIP 7702.
The main takeaway for any security leader listening is this. AA is absolutely essential for onboarding and user protection, but it requires a complete security migration in your thinking. You're moving from static key management to dynamic contract auditing, adopting modular standards like ERC 7579, and rigorously, continuously auditing all of your dependencies, the factories, the paymasters, your own logic. That's not a suggestion. It's a non-negotiable best practice.
And this new capability, this delegated programmable control, it opens up some really wild new governance questions. We know smart accounts are enabling these DeFi super apps and letting AI agents co-tenant user wallets. So given this fundamental shift from single key control to fine-grained programmable delegation, what fundamental governance or legal structures need to be built around a single ERC 7579 compliant smart wallet that might soon be making automated cross-chain financial decisions on your behalf? Think about the regulatory and liability implications of that as you plan your next deployment.